All right, we are back for episode 54 of Digital
Y
Divination.
Hooray.
Man, yeah, Ron, I think we need to address that little technical mishap we had last episode.
Yeah, that kinda glitch. I mean, it was weird. It was like we weren't even ourselves in the digital divination that we do. It's really like we were, how like, trying to deal with all these legends about lore. I don't it was weird.
Well, that's because it wasn't us. We were hacked, and I think we need to explain to our folks who are listening to these episodes sequentially that them folks over there at Legend Lore took over our channel and started broadcasting pretending to be us.
Well, and then it was like the worst possible us, right? Because it was all about how
Yeah.
Paizo's going to be dying unless they flip over to 5th edition, and they have to do nothing but 5th edition, and anything else is a failure. And whew, that was pretty extreme. It was like taking the worst possible rumors that have been circling around on the internet after the announcement about the Abomination Vaults 5e, and insisting that they were going to be the case. That doesn't sound like us at all.
Oh, I'm confused now. I That's not what I heard when I listened to episode 53. Is that what they were
Of
talking
digital
about?
divination. Oh,
Yeah.
you're talking about, no, I'm talking about where we showed up on Legend and Lore. You're talking about digital
Oh,
divination, where there was a
yes,
lot of
yes,
discussion about Elden Ring and
yes.
oh yes,
Various
oh yes.
video games they were playing and stuff like that. Yeah, just for everyone else out there, just note the date on that, and we'll move forward. Um, I will say though that we had a pretty good time taking over their podcast, Legend Lore. If you haven't had a chance to listen to Legend Lore 42, we do discuss some things of importance there.
That's true, especially near the end where we talk about kind of what we're doing. If
Yeah.
you're tuning in to digital divination because you want to know kind of what's going on in our lives, then you go to the end of that legend lore. That'll get you there. I did
Uh,
notice that when we were trying to, when we were crossing the streams there, they've
yeah.
got a more complex introduction than we do. We just kind of get going. We're just here's the
Yeah.
music and here's who we are, and then we just sort of start yammering.
Well, I think we make the assumption that people know who we are and just go with it, and they make the assumption that somebody could be coming new to their stream every episode, and they kind of introduce themselves. You think we need to do that?
Yeah, I think you're onto that, and they give their backgrounds and why
Yeah.
they're sort of the experts. But that comes with the caution they give, which I think is really interesting to hear. That
Hmm.
look, this
Hmm.
is it's rule zero, it's your table, and
Right.
keep that in mind. Ultimately, that's a really good general rule that I think not enough people remember. That
Right.
you can do it however you want at your table, and it's whatever however you're doing it is the right way. You don't have to worry about doing it the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree. But I think the way we talk about stuff most of the time, it's usually this is what we're doing
Mhm.
and this is how we've been doing it. I don't think we ever kind of definitively lay out, oh yeah, this is what the rules say and this is how you should be doing something though.
Yeah, I think that really came to the fore just a few episodes ago. We were talking about the precog, and one
Right.
of the things that you'd mentioned is, well, so many people have talked about what the precog is.
Yeah.
We're like, well, what they don't know is what we think about the precog. So
Right.
we're just
Right.
we're just so we're not establishing credibility in order to educate an audience. We're just people sort of opining, shoot from the hip. If you're here, you're at least curious about what we have to say about stuff, so
So
we'll tell
so
you
this
what we
is
think about stuff.
this is not the science section. This is the editorial section then?
if
Yeah.
not the comics, John.
All right. Okay. Well, then let's get to our opining. Um, last night we had a couple interesting battles in our Devastation arc uh, podcast that we were recording for Intrepid Heroes, which, by the way, I mentioned it last night. That is our 100th episode that we've recorded for them, which is kind of cool.
That was fantastic. I thought that was really neat to be able to get to episode 100. Now, nobody's going to be able to hear the episode 100 for a little while because we're not quite caught
Yeah.
up there yet in our
Yeah.
announcements. So you're getting a little bit of a sneak peek as to what's coming in a couple of months.
Yes. Yes. And I think what was kind of interesting about that is that's one of the sequential battles that we had in there, in that those it was across 2 episodes that we recorded. We are looking more and more at kind of the differences that we see in high level play, the 14th level characters, compared to what we were seeing earlier, first, second, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. It's some big dramatic differences, especially, I think, in the importance of party coordination to accomplish things.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like we did two last night when we recorded. We did two fights. They'll show up in different episodes, but they're one right
Mhm.
after the other. And the thing that really struck me about it is the one that I expected to be easier, I feel like the party found a little more challenging. And the one that I thought would be, it had a risk of being just totally overwhelming was not as big of an issue as I suspected.
All right. And so I thought they were both kind of challenging and maybe not challenging on for various reasons. So how do you characterize each of those though? Which is which?
Well, okay. Well, I had thought so. There, I want to avoid a lot of spoilers, but I will
Right.
say the first fight was with a couple of robots, and it was in an area that was extremely large.
Right.
These
Right.
robots are totally spec'd to be just killers in melee combat, and they can fight fairly well at a distance. But the the area was so big that they could get off a lot of their ranged shots pretty effectively.
Mhm.
And it had a lot of the players scrambling for what they had for ranges for stuff, right? Oh, I want to affect that robot
Right.
over. Oh no, it's what is my range on that? Only 60 feet, and how it's 80 feet away. Okay, well that's way too far. Or well, I want to shoot at it, but it's not. Gosh, it's not even in my second range increment. It's in my third range increment. I'm going to take a big penalty to try to shoot at it.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Well,
feel like the monster itself is also a little bit a little bit awkwardly built, these robots, because like I say, they're more powerful in melee, but their guns not only have a fusion on them that lets them be concealed if they take a
right.
move action after firing it, which is kind of neat, but it discourages the monster from getting really close.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
monster also has the automatic ability with the guns that it shoots. So it can be really effective if it can get like a 40-foot cone. But by the time
Right.
it's close enough to be in a 40-foot cone, it wants to be in melee. It's more useful
Right.
for it to rush right up.
See, this is interesting. This is news to me actually because I was under the impression that they were kind of stronger at range and weaker at melee. That's why I was kind of closing on them. And then they were doing all those attacks. I think, oh, maybe I got that wrong. The interesting thing about that particular part of the map we were on, it was massive. They were 10-foot squares. Each square equals 10 foot, and I think the range between the monsters was close to 200 feet between each of
Hmm.
them. They came from different directions, and we kind of showed up in the middle, like in a crossfire. And in that situation, we have the whole party. What do we do? Do we go to one side and leave our flank exposed? Do we split the party, which we've done before? Doesn't necessarily work out.
Frequently,
Or
in fact.
yeah. Do we stay where we are and hope the party comes to us? Which is initially what I thought might happen. So I didn't close immediately. So I have a big vanguard, I have some pretty good speed. I could have used my entropic charge and gotten really close, probably. I decided not to do that because I didn't want to get too far away from the rest of the party,
Hmm.
and I kind of wanted to draw the creature closer to us so that it would be within range of my teammates, but it didn't really seem to take the bait.
Well, that's right. I was trying to kind of frantically use the best of the creature's
Mhm,
abilities as I could. One thing that really struck me though is that everything is sort of bigger by a factor at higher levels. All of the hits
mhm,
and the hit points are bigger, yeah, not quite by a factor of 10, but it kind of feels like it, right? Because your enemies are going to have 250 to 300 hit points instead of
right,
25 to 30. And the hits you're doing, like a good solid hit is 50 points rather
right,
than 5. And kind of a, it'll get by kind of hit is 30 points instead of
mhm,
3, like it can be at lower levels when you're rolling your D4s for your laser pistols.
Right. Right.
So it feels like everything is really scaled very well as far as the damage that's done and the damage that the enemies can take. But people's sense is still kind of stuck in some of the lower levels. So
Yes.
when somebody did a big crit and did 100 points of damage, I think people were
Right.
a little amazed the monster was still standing. Like, it's not even down to halfway yet, right? That's
Right.
come on, think like the big leagues here.
Well, I think most of them haven't GM'd higher. I don't think any of them have GM'd higher levels, so they aren't familiar with that. I've done a couple of APs up through 12th level, and usually they're big bosses that are over 200, 250 points. So
Mhm.
I wasn't surprised by that. And so when in that particular instance, when somebody critted right off the bat and they weren't even bloodied, I wasn't surprised, but they obviously were and weren't happy with how difficult this monster was. Why? And it's like, but you're hitting them for massive amounts and you're hitting
Right.
pretty regularly. Also, their ACs were really high, but then, my character is sporting a 38 KAC. So I expect their ACs to be pretty high. Their attack bonus is super high. Of course, ours is super high. So I
Mhm.
I I think one of the things that the players tend to run into is that they don't see how high they've come. They're only seeing how high the monster's coming, and they're not looking
Right.
at, well, is it staying at a relative level or not? Oh,
Right. And there's a little bit of game design behind that too, trying to
right,
make things feel like you're more powerful. If all you're doing is kind of running to stay even, then it
right.
doesn't feel like you're getting ahead any. It's important from time to time to make sure you're fighting monsters that are just kind of easy to hit or
Mhm.
go down kind of easily. Neither of these fights were that way. But one of the things I thought was really neat about it was that that combat in particular lasted long enough for people to have their abilities come online.
Right,
Stephanie Solarian has that ray of light ability to just basically
right.
instantly be just more than 100 feet away on the other side and flanking against the other critter. And there
Mhm.
wasn't anything the robot could do about it. That was, I think, really satisfying for her to be able to say, oh, well, this is a power that I only get to use in kind of the late stages of combat. And here we are in a late stage of combat in a way where it really matters to be able to use.
Right, and I think in addition to that, we often aren't that far away from an enemy that we're trying to target, that it's worthwhile, like, using all of her, her 3 rounds worth to transport herself there when she can just run, she can just charge pretty quickly and get in its face and attack. So I think the particular map really lent itself to that. And it also kind of showcased for the players the importance of having good mobility overall.
Yeah,
We're
I think
okay speed
absolutely.
wise, but nobody's really fast. And like Stephanie was running into some limitations of, she has a jetpack. And hey, a jetpack's great, but that's a lower level, like a third level or fifth level item. Or she could have got a force pack, which basically a force pack has 50-foot movement, right? So it's quite a bit more than the 30 that you get and adds a lot. You do a double move, you cover a lot more ground, using the haste circuits on top of that. So a lot of different things were coming into play just mobility wise that we hadn't even worried about in the past.
Right, right. And it had people looking things up that they hadn't had to look up before, weapon
Right,
ranges, and oh, how far can I get? How many rounds can I use my haste circuit anyway? Because that,
right.
could matter. So it was good, I guess, from a sense that so the robots posed you more challenge than I thought they would, but the
Mhm.
challenge wasn't really was anybody down into hit points past their stamina and at risk of dying. No, the challenge was you got to kind of think about what it is you do and how what you can bring to bear to move around a battlefield, to manipulate a
Right,
battlefield, to help other people move around a battlefield, can sometimes really matter because when you fight in close confines, it doesn't. So this is the first battle that I realized that anybody who had a sniper rifle ought to be pulling it out for because you get those ludicrously high ranges. But of
right.
course, with all the close in battles we've done, nobody carries one of those around.
And we don't have a soldier in our party anymore.
That's correct. In fact, much like the robots you were facing, you guys are just way better in melee than you are at ranged.
Right, right. Which I think most of the places we've gone and what we've done, that's worked out fine. We
Hmm.
haven't wanted to keep it range, though I'll say the second battle that we did, I think we would have liked to been at range instead and stayed at range if we could have.
Well, that's absolutely true. In the second battle, one of the things that made it feel high level for me was the monsters had an aura that does intelligence and wisdom damage to you in the aura.
Yeah,
And so you can't stay toe to toe with them for very long because they've got this 15-foot aura around them. And as soon as people started to realize that's what it was doing and realize the threat of that, I didn't help the tension any by being sure to point out, hey, let me know if either of those scores get to zero
right,
because then something else might happen. It might matter.
right.
Um, which made people really panicked about being too close to these monsters, which was a more typical fight in close quarters. I really expected those creatures to be significantly more overwhelming than they were, as far
Mhm,
as damage they dish out, as far as magical abilities that they had to hurt your party. They're pretty primarily a tricky kind of monster, but the tricky kind of
mhm.
monsters can sometimes load up on damage unexpectedly quickly, and that just didn't happen. You guys didn't have as much trouble with that right out of the gate as I suspected you might.
Well, I think part of it is we recognized there was something weird about them with the aura early on. You had some saves that, Simon had to make, right? And Simon
Hmm.
had found them earlier, and then my character, because it's a large creature that's a vanguard, has a 20-foot reach, so could attack beyond the aura, though the creatures kept stepping in closer, obviously, for doing things. But I think that we had enough early on warning as to, oh yeah, proximity is a problem, that everyone else could start using some range and doing range attacks and things like that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's also, by the time you're at this high level, in addition to the fact the monsters have sort of crazy abilities that they wouldn't have at lower level, you
Hmm.
as player characters have abilities you wouldn't have at lower levels. One of these monsters' big tricks was the mislead spell, which if you haven't read
Hmm.
it creates an illusionary duplicate of you right in
Right.
your spot while you become greater invisible and can then move off and wreak all sorts of havoc because you're greater invisible and everybody still thinks you're in the space that you left because the illusion there
Right.
continues to move as you do and things like that. So it's a good way to really trick a party, but as soon as you've got a higher level party, you've got people with blind sense or even people with blind sight. Uh, a lot of abilities that specifically say this overcomes invisibility or similar.
Hmm.
True seeing becomes something that you can more readily get a hold of either as a spell or with effects in technological items. The limning weapon fusion, which lets you just make somebody who is invisible glow, so
Hmm.
that negates their ability. You guys had a lot of ways to get around some of the sneakiest tricks, I think, that these monsters were trying to bring to bear.
Well, that's kind of a lesson learned. And again, no spoilers, but we played through another AP where the final boss had greater invisibility, and we did not have an easy way to figure out how to get by it.
Right.
So I think myself, actually, anytime I play high level now, anywhere, I have said, you know what, I'm going to make a way that I can get around that, and hopefully help my party so that they can get around it too.
Mhm.
And I think multiple people are now taking on some tools for helping that.
Yeah, I think that's right, and they've got the ability to use that. One of the things that I realized after the battle that was available but wasn't even necessary is that Stephanie Solarian has the armor upgrade that can turn on and see invisibility.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
that makes invisibility. Even if you hadn't had a couple of ways around it, you had ways around it you didn't even need to use. There were so many ways around it that you had,
Right, right.
but that's the case. I expected, like I say, I expected that to be a substantially more effective bit of trickery that they could use and have more effective abilities they could use. It was actually, I mean, I was paying attention to, you had a pretty good range of saves you succeeded at and saves you failed. It just so happened that the saves you succeeded were the ones that were most critical. And you might not have even known it because I'm like, oh, cast a spell, so and so will make a will save, right? But the ones that you were failing were the ones that kind of didn't matter as much. And the ones that were you were succeeding on were the ones that really could have swung the tide of battle. So it's one of those situations where it maybe didn't seem unreasonably lucky or unlucky, but the way that the dice fell, it happened to have gotten you out of some pretty sticky situations.
Well, I'm really concerned about that for my vanguard, in particular things like, dominate person, or, things that basically are will saves that would negate my ability to do stuff. And I've taken iron will and improved iron will, and then I have a vanguard uh, ability that allows me a reroll versus spell like abilities that kind of affect that as well.
Hmm.
Because my will saves are just atrocious, and consequently, I end up failing them a lot. And I failed twice in that particular battle. But the interesting thing is that we have multiple characters that help bolster that. So failing the two will saves I did, so the initial one and the reroll caused me to take 4 points of intelligence and wisdom damage, and I don't have high
You
scores in
know, a lot
either
to
of those.
spare. Yeah.
You know? So I was really getting worried there, and then we had 2 of our players says, "Oh, don't worry, I got you." And I thought that was kinda cool.
Yeah, that and ways to mitigate a type of damage that is ability score damage that doesn't come up very much was really neat to see because it shows that you guys can be really prepared and bring out the sort of the necessary abilities when you have to, and those are the kind of things that feel good to have on a character sheet. You're like, oh, I've got just the tool for this that has been presented to me, and that's pretty neat. I do think that there is a sort of a tendency there of sort of the big beefy type fighters to have a terrible will save. One of the things that
Mhm.
I've said was true in earlier editions of D&D. It's been carried through to Pathfinder first edition, right into Starfinder, yeah, to some degree in Pathfinder second edition. That you got to think about what kind of saves you're going to fail because very few characters are good at all of them. And if
Right.
your reflex save is bad, it means I'm okay with taking more damage because that's what happens on failed reflex saves most of the time. If your fortitude
Mhm.
save is bad, it's I'm okay with being taken out of the fight entirely by stuff, right? Getting disintegrated or finger of death or poison, some of the things with fortitude saves.
Yeah.
And if your will save is bad, what you're saying is I'm okay with sometimes having to fight against my party
Mhm.
because the things that control you or make you run away or things like that, which often forces party members to either have to go get you or something like that,
Yeah.
or charm or dominate you. That's what failed will saves will get. So sometimes you don't have much choice in the matter. If there's a class that you particularly love to play and it's bad in one of those types of will of saving throws, then you're just going to be bad in that. But that's the things that kind of communicate. Reflex save, I'm okay taking more damage. Low fortitude save, I'm okay getting knocked out of the fight early, and will save I'm okay getting turned against my friends. So that's what you're telling me when you say my will save is really low.
Well, yeah, and I recognize that, and I did my best to mitigate it with other things. I
Hmm.
spent 2 feats, and when you consider how many feats I actually get, that's a pretty substantial amount.
Big investment. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, big investment trying to do that, and even then, it just helps a little bit. I'm hoping that there would be that they'll really pay off sometime, that I won't fail 2 in a row, and when it's really important and it works. Um, but even so, I think everybody can't be bulletproof either, right? You're
That's
gonna have a
absolutely
weakness
true.
somehow. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people who are taking feats are doing so with one of two things in mind. Do I want to be better at the things I'm already good at, or do I want to shore up some of the weaknesses? And I feel like at this level, you've got, even if you don't get very many feats, you get enough to be able to kind of make a decision. Like, oh, well, some of my things are going to be better at the stuff I'm already good at, and some of the things are going to try to help bolster the stuff I'm not so great at.
Mhm. Well, I think with a vanguard, especially kind of the way I'm looking at playing it, which is I do damage, but I try to be much more kind of defensive, protective of the party. That's kind of what I want to
Yep.
do. And so that's where my disciplines have been, and the things I've gotten. I have a lot of options on things I can do already that spending feats on things wasn't something I had to worry about too much. In fact, the blind sense and blind sight I have were Vanguard abilities. So
Hmm.
it's just kind of really neat that, those are things maybe I might have spent for blind sense, spend a feat on. You can't really get, I don't think you can get blind fight with a feat. But so, mixing and matching there to kind of get a good balance is easy enough given all the neat abilities you get with these characters as they get to higher levels. And you can kind of get really cool items as well. Like I have an item I haven't even used yet. It's a Mark II diffraction cloak. Now you mentioned people that are bad at certain saves. My
Hmm.
reflex save isn't great, but the Mark II refraction cloak gives me 2 rerolls on versus damage on for reflex saves.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, so there's ways to mitigate it with equipment, with magic, and with things like that as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think that once you get up to higher levels, you've got the ability to look more broadly at what solution
Yeah,
there might be for your for things that you're running up against. Is there some technological solution that's going to help me out here? Is there some spell I can ask for our mystic or technomancer or whatever to keep
right.
ready in case something like this happens?
Now, one of the things that I found interesting in this AP, especially here, we're near the end, and again, we're not trying to give a lot of spoilers, but I think we're ending up giving some spoilers. So don't listen if you're really concerned about that. One of the big complaints I've had, and it's been echoed by other folks, not just me, and throughout all the Starfinder APs that I've played or run, is there haven't been a lot of loot or a lot of money for the players. It's I asked Jake Tondro this, and he said, "Well, we intentionally expect they're going to miss some of these, so we put in an extra 50% of loot everywhere." And it's like, well, it still seems pretty light, and I think it's in part because the what you get is they can't give you something that fits every class that's going to be in the
Hmm.
party. So you're always, unless you have the perfect mix, always somebody gets a little shortchanged. But I thought that in this particular case, wow, this is like Christmas. Are they trying to make up for all those other APs? Because they dropped an awful lot of high level gear, some of it 2 levels higher than what we're at now,
Right.
which I thought was really neat.
Well, and that is all gear that it's assumed that the party is going to keep, because if we
Right.
drop in loot that is really kind of much lower level than the party is, we assume they're not going to actually use it and they're going to sell it, and then it's only worth 1/10 of what it is. So
Hmm.
if you've got you can actually spread that XP budget quite far if you've got multiple enemies using things that are a little bit lower than, or the credit budget, excuse me,
Hmm.
quite far. If you have multiple lower level enemies using gear that is lower level than the characters would otherwise use, you can kind of put in a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of stuff that isn't quite so useful,
Right.
and that doesn't feel like the big win that a horde of higher level items does.
Yeah, this was kind of neat because there was basically everyone got an armor upgrade. Well, there was enough for 5 out of 6 of us, right?
Hmm.
But all the armor that was provided was useful and had neat stuff in it. Really, I to some extent, like some of the things that Stephanie got, some of the mods that she got in hers. It's like, wow, this is like some really, really neat, useful stuff that is going to be
Right.
beneficial. That you start seeing at higher level, like fortification. So how do you mitigate those massive crits? Well, you give them a miss crit chance, so to speak, with
That's right.
fortification. So I thought, well, that's really neat to kind of see in there. The thing is, it wasn't the same on kind of the weapons point of view, and I see this a lot. They almost always seem to include a Solarian crystal of some sort now because they don't want to
Hmm.
shortchange the Solarian. Um, and I actually think the one that's provided was pretty useful, but it's different utility than the one she already had. But
Right.
then the rest
Right.
of the weapons, there was a whole lot of stuff there that was really good for soldiers, and we didn't have any soldiers.
Yeah, lean really heavily into heavy weapons, and you don't have
Right.
anybody who's using heavy weapons,
Yeah.
and that's actually from the Starfinder adventure writing that I've done, that's actually kind of an awkward position to be in, right? Because if you're
Hmm.
going to give out pistols, you know everybody's going to be excited about pistols, and the tendency is, all right, well, let's just give out pistols. But and they give out the occasional Solarian weapon crystal or the occasional suit of powered armor. That's the kind of thing that can make a character that uses those types of things go, oh, this
Right.
is very special. This is a thing kind of just for me. And I almost wish that we were a little more flexible about
Hmm.
in a hoard of treasure or something like that. Say this thing here is either this powered armor or this Solarian weapon crystal or this, I don't know, advanced melee weapon, right? Depending on what your party is going to find the most useful.
Right.
So it's not that you're
Right.
finding a bunch of stuff that you feel like was for different characters. You're always finding the kind of stuff that works well for your characters, right? And I think that there is, even though it's kind of classic in the fantasy sort of genre to say, oh, well, we found a big bunch of hoard of stuff that we're going to sell and so on. And science fantasy is not like science fantasy. The heroes are kind of finding stuff they could use all the time,
Hmm.
and they running across something that is absolutely great for somebody else. Really, in the science fantasy trope, only means you're about to find somebody like that, right? If you found a heavy weapon and powered armor, that means you're about to meet some sort of soldier who is going to then join up your party. That's not the way Starfinder runs, and so it's better if those were in fact swapped out for useful gear for the party that is at your table right then.
Hmm. Well, would it be feasible? I don't know how word count would be to just have a like a loot list based on, okay, what are the classes that you're running, that your party is? If it's these classes, this is the loot that you give, or is that too being too specific, too tailored to the party?
Well, we when we tailor like that, the way to do that with the lowest amount of word count and maximum amount of flexibility is to just give the party money. And
Yeah.
that's something that's most often as a reward for completing a big mission. The people that hired you
Hmm.
or the people that benefit from it are like, well, here's a bunch of money. Now you can go get whatever you want. Or sometimes framed along the lines of you can have any, level N or lower
Hmm.
weapon that you want to get, for example, or something like that. But I think that the one of the things that you run into when you start getting a little more specific, I mean, having read ahead a little bit in this adventure that you're playing now, when you get to the end, one of the thankful NPCs will say, "Oh, thank you very much. Here is this thing, which is a high level thing, but which nobody in the party will be interested in."
Hmm.
So, do we? There's nothing in there that says specifically, "Hey, maybe you should consider tailoring this."
Right.
But I think it's probably worth considering tailoring it.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to recall something like that near the end of one of the other APs we played. We found some museum pieces, stuff on display. Some of them were really cool, but not all of them were useful, for
Mhm.
our particular party. Now, then that was the end of the adventure, and so you either used it or not at that point, and you
Mhm.
didn't use it, then you went with what you have. I think one of the interesting things about loot in general in the gameplay is oftentimes, we as players see it as foreshadowing about the type of encounter we might be coming up with soon. So
Mhm.
if there's a certain type of weapon damage that's prevalent in there, if there's a certain type of magic item that allows you to do something, oh, wait a second, this might be really useful
Mhm.
coming down the road. Similar to, in Pathfinder, when you come across a cache of silver weapons, oh,
Right.
yes, we better keep those because who knows what, or iron weapons or whatever,
Yep,
it's,
exactly, exactly.
that,
We wanna
that
make
kind
sure
of,
that you're not stumbling into automatic failure for something. I think that's less of a concern at high level in any system, but in
yeah.
Starfinder, no, for sure. Especially having seen you guys in action, you're so flexible about the ways you can address things. I feel like
Hmm.
I wouldn't need to include something to protect you against, mental control, right? Because you got ways around that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. When I'm looking at my characters and building, I'm trying to think what are the showstoppers that have affected us in the past, and
Mhm.
great invisibility is one. Going against in corporeal. features is another.
Hmm.
So having ways to deal with things that,
Swarms
yeah,
is a common one. Yep.
swarms, right? That's especially lower levels, man. As we've seen in Horizons of the Vast, starting into
Right. Right.
random encounters with swarms. It's like, oh, well, we got to find a way to deal with this at first and second level. How do we do that? Um, but yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Well, I think I think we're getting to a really exciting part of the AP now. We're really gotten used to our characters now, and this is the Devastation
Hmm.
arc. We're getting near the end of the first book, but we're really getting used to our characters and knowing what each other can do. So setting up each other or counting on each other. We know how people are playing, where they like to position, how they like to do stuff. So I think it's going to make the next book, I think, really really exciting.
Right. As you can lean on each other's abilities more. I feel like, for example, a lot of people might have just considered your character to be just kind of another soldier, but when they
Right,
realized how protected they are when they're near you, and how protected they're not when they're far from you, I've
right,
already seen people tend to cluster up around you in order to get
right.
the benefits of the Vanguard's protection.
Right. Yeah, and that was, like, really explicit this last time. "Oh, there's a big monster. I'm not gonna go too far ahead. I'm gonna stay by Leroy." Yeah.
Hmm.
So, all right. Well, I think I look forward to talking more about this, and especially since this goes all the way through to the end game, 20th level.
It does.
So,
It does.
we'll
I
get a
feel like,
chance to.
yeah, we're going to be able to talk about, the increasingly high level abilities and combat and what happens there.
Mhm. Yeah, that'll be fun.
So
So,
get that. What do you else you have going on, John?
well, I'll just tell you one thing, and, I had to go up to Camino Island, this afternoon, meet a contractor, and on the way up, there was a massive accident on I-5 southbound.
Oh,
I was going
really?
northbound. They shut down all lanes of the highway. In
Oh,
fact,
no.
it was shut down for multiple hours, and, so I saw that going up there, so I met my contractor, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna take a nap. Hope it goes away. It's nice and sunny coming in." And then, I had to check the traffic, and it was still all blocked. So I took a really roundabout way to bypass um,
The freeway.
the freeway to go in. It only took another 20 minutes. So it was good because I wanted to make sure I had time to record. So that's been
Mhm.
my exciting thing for today. How about you?
Is traffic and missing
Yeah.
traffic. I've got the exciting thing that happened to me is, we've been talking about the Scaldwood Blight Adventure Path that I've done. I ordered a proof copy of my book and it came
Mhm.
in. And the
Nice.
reason, which is very exciting, I like the way it looks in the interior. The colors are a little more muted than they are on the screen, but I feel like that kind of works right for
Mhm.
for a book. Um, I'm not unhappy about it. I do. Well, part of the reason that we order a print proof though is because you can see whether or not, like, this cover is crooked. The image on it
Mhm.
is misplaced against the background. So I'm glad I did not order several dozen of these and
Yes.
and then expect to be able to sign them and send them out. There's a little bit of misalignment on some of the pages. That's not even going much into the text, which I feel like is, like the PDF. So it's already kind of,
Right. Yeah.
it's already been edited and it's been, broken out in useful ways, and there isn't weird dangling chapter headers or places where chapters just sort of end suddenly and start on the next page. I want to confirm that that's gone all the way through with the printing as well, but it's neat. It's exciting. This is the first project that I've done as big as this to have a whole, like, printer proof stage where I'm compiling sort of, feedback from
Mhm.
other people that are helping me out in order to get a really good final product. And that was kind of neat. That was a neat surprise. It wasn't expected to come in for a couple more weeks. And so when I got it in the
Wow.
post office this morning, I'm like, oh, this is very exciting. I told the person behind the counter, I'm like, I'm very excited for this book. And she's like, okay.
Yes. You don't get it. It's a book. It's
That's
exciting.
right. It's my
Yeah.
book, and I'm excited
Yeah.
about it. So
It looks really thick. Like when I
it,
saw that.
yeah, it is. It's pretty good sized, pretty good thickness, 254 pages, something like that.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, it's pretty solid. The paper in it, because it's color all the way through, the paper is a
Mhm.
little bit thicker, and I've done some black and white printing of books that don't have spines, or they're smaller, thinner adventures, and those tend to be really they're both thin and thin looking because black and white doesn't need as thick a paper to hold
Mm.
the color, but I wanted to get slightly thicker paper to make sure it was holding the color very well.
Oh, that's cool. I also heard some other news about you in Drive Through RPG today.
Oh yeah, this is exciting. So the Abomination Vault's GM's guide that I did as one of the like really close to the release of Pathfinder Infinite to help people who are running, like people like me who are running the Abomination Vaults, to compile some of the quests and some of the stats together, provide some more roaming power groups that you can use, some mini adventures that can add on to the dungeons, kind of a grab bag full of stuff to make Abomination Vaults easier. And I just hit just over the Electrum level of sales. So I have 250 of those sold. That's really
Wow.
exciting. I don't know that there's another Infinite product that is up to Electrum sales yet. So
Wow.
I'm keeping an eye out, but that's really exciting. I'm sure that the news about Abomination Vaults being compiled into hardcover helped, and maybe a little
Mhm.
boost there, even though it's not directly helpful for fifth edition. The fact that Abomination Vaults is in the news about the fifth edition has been yeah, been a help. I'm sure. I'm excited about that. I did have somebody ask on a interview I did, hey, has in the compilation that you've done, have you been able to use the stuff you did for the Abomination Vaults GM's guide? And I'm like, oh no, 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 no. That is an entirely separate non-Paizo thing. It would in fact be pretty inappropriate for me to be raking in a bunch of money privately on this product and then fold it right into a Paizo product without asking anybody and just
Right.
capitalizing on that a couple ways. That would be, I feel like that would be really taking advantage of my position at Paizo, so I try to keep those two very separate.
Mhm. Mhm.
But even keeping it very separately in that regard, right? The product is purely just a help, like the kind of help that I want as a GM. It's doing very well, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, you use it every time we play, so it must be good.
True,
Yeah.
true, true,
Yeah.
true.
So, what comes after Electrum?
Gold is next, and that is, I think, selling 500 copies. I am a ways from that. But when I got silver, which is right before Electrum, I thought I was a ways from Electrum, and then that kind of, rushed in. So I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's kind of neat. There are a couple of other great products I've seen on Infinite that are already at silver and are
Mhm.
approaching kind of fast. Luis Loza's got a Dragonkin Versatile Ancestry that has done really well.
Right, right.
The issue number one of the Queer Finder magazine, which is a delight to read. I picked that up. And then some of the fiction that's on there. There's a lot of really great things on Pathfinder
Yeah,
Infinite and Starfinder Infinite. It's certainly worth checking out.
cool. All right, well, I hope everybody's recovered well from our last episode, and we're kinda back to normal now. I anticipate
Unglitched.
yeah, I anticipate we'll at least be able to go another 51 weeks or so without another glitch, hopefully. We'll see. Well, I'm John.
And I'm Ron, and this is Digital Divination.